as a history teacher, usually when I start off my classes, I usually have a pop quiz, okay? And just to find out how many people know anything about anything, okay? And usually what I did at the high school level, they all thought that they were really getting over when I started asking them a question. I said, well, I'll take out a piece of paper, I'll write the answer down. I said, first of all, I want you to tell me who discovered America. Well, everybody's sitting back there, and I could hear them say, Columbus, how you spell Columbus? Okay. And who was the first president of the United States? I said, oh my God, this is so easy, right? George Washington, put it down. Okay, and then we go on. And I said, well, okay, I said, I can probably guarantee that your first two questions are incorrect. And they said, well, what do you mean? Did Columbus discover America? I said, no. I said, is this named the United States of Columbus? It's the United States of America. Amerigo Vespucci. Okay? So I said, you're going to have to dig deeper than that. But I said, you know what? When Columbus got over here, he took the flag and he put it in the sand and he said, I claim this land in the name of God, King, and country. And then he goes, who the hell are those people? Arawaks, the Indians. Geez, did you claim the land that somebody else actually owned? Well, gosh darn, that's what the United States has been doing for years. Problem is, we just don't teach that at school. Okay. And then as for first president of the United States, under which government? The First Continental Congress, the Second Continental Congress, which is really part. That's where the Declaration of Independence came out. So if the Declaration of Independence came out in the Second Continental Congress, then basically, guess what? That's when we established the United States of America. So who was president of the Second Continental Congress, 13th session? It was John Hancock. But Hancock was not around. He was out robbing ships and bringing the stuff in and selling it at a discount. Okay? That's all American, isn't it? And the other thing is that come on in, Lynn. How you doing? Come on in. And the thing of it was, they did have what they call a president pro tem, temporary president, while the president's out doing whatever he's doing. And that was John Hanson. So the correct answer would be John Hanson. Now that's going pretty deep. So now you're learning a little bit of American history. But that's how deep we're going to go in the Kennedy assassination. We have to. Because this is not just a surface thing. And I know with the presentation that we had last week, I probably lost some of you guys because you're sitting there going, my God, who even wants to know about how many coffins there are and the caskets and stuff like that? Well, that's very important to a murder case. If the body was transported to another coffin, we have to know this. Well, nobody wants to sit back and say, well, God, who did that? Well, guess what? Cuba didn't do it. Soviet Union didn't do it. So it's one of those things you sit back and you go, well, who did it? Well, want to make a guess? We did. Well, who's we? I didn't do it. I was 13 years old. So, when you think of the Kennedy assassination, you're going to have to go outside the box that's presented to you in our American history books. And we're going to go outside the box here. And most of this material I'm getting from the National Archives, and I'm getting from the 1,250 books, 60 books that I've read, and all of the documents that I've come across all these years. So, with that to do, we're going to start with one of the most controversial programs that I've ever put out. And I've had people tell me, you don't need to put this out. I go, yeah, I do. I'm tired of not having answers. But at the same time, when I put this out, you're going to look at it and say, my God, you're dissing America and the United States. That's not hard to do, guys. That is not hard to do, even today. The problem is that I'm a veteran. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I stood up for this country, fought for whatever. I didn't let too many people know because Vietnam was not one of those things you just want to go out and say, hey, baby, Vietnam. You just don't do stuff like that. And I do know people who have been there that are suffering right now because of Agent Orange. And the United States government finally started to take care of them. So we're going to get into what we call the dark side of America. And that dark side of America is the stuff that a lot of you don't want to hear, but it's there. Okay? So bear with program is Guardians of the Republic, the men and the institutions who terminated the life of President Kennedy. JFK, a targeted kill. The elimination of a national security threat. In 1992, Congress passed the JFK Act. Over 4 million documents and files were released from the National Archives. In November of 2017, 3,000 documents, 20,000 files were liberated. About 75% of these files come from the CIA and another 12% from the FBI. The remainder are sourced from a variety of other agencies. The National Security Agency, the Church Committee in 1975, the House Senate Select Committee in 1977, and others. What role do these documents play in determining truth in America's contemporary history? Let me introduce you to the men who sold us Lee Harvey Oswald and the single bullet theory. The Warren Commission members in 1963, Earl Warren, Allen Dulles, John J. McCloy, Richard Russell, Gerald Ford, John Sherman Cooper, Hale Boggs, and then that was the original 7. Then they added J. Lee Rankin as the general counsel. Then they added these two gentlemen, Arlen Specter and David Bellin. It's Arlen Specter and David Bellin that come up with this, the single bullet theory. As you enter the building that houses the CIA, you will see this verse, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." John 8:32. The truth may set you free, but first it will piss you off. That's where we're going. The National Security State, November 22nd, 1963. The OSS was the organization of, in fact, it was the preliminary organization just before the CIA. So we'll put the CIA up there in 1963. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These are the people that I call are the guardians of the Republic. Now remember, this is supposed to be, we all learned that we live in a democratic republic. All right? I'm not sure how much democratic we are anymore. It's more like a friendly fascism. Okay? But then we need to break those terminologies down, and we're not going to go totally back to the history class or government class. But for the most part, we live in a republic. Dealey Plaza, the altar of national security, the stage for the greatest murder mystery in modern history. Did we sacrifice our freedom, our security, our values, our conscience on this altar of national security on November 22nd, 1963? Friday, November 22nd, 1963. The American public on November 22nd, 1963 was on a lunch break when they found out about the murder of President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. All were hardworking United States citizens, some on the job, some at school, and some at home doing housework. Besides the local newspapers and magazine, current modern communication and information system consisted of one single 12-inch black and white TV with 3 network stations, CBS, NBC, and ABC. The majority of American citizens, if they were fortunate, had one TV. They also had AM radio. This was the outside means of communication which was brought directly into all American homes in 1963. No remotes, no multiple sets of TVs in each house or every room, no 90-inch flat-screen TVs, no 600 plus satellite channels, no cell phones, no computers, no internet, no email, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Snapchat, no iPods, no iPads, and no FM radio. Good God, how did we even survive? We'll get to that. All right, 54 years after the murder of President Kennedy, the same intuitive and popular belief exists that was common in the first hours of his assassination, that his murder occurred as a result of a conspiracy. The document releases, transcripts, and tapes which have become available in the last 2 decades only serve to confirm how many individuals and indeed witnesses privately held this belief. Beliefs which were expressed privately, but which for the most part did not enter the public record. One common challenge to the concept of a conspiracy is that either the institutions of law or of government would have ensured that people with knowledge of a probable conspiracy would bring it before the public and make it a matter of historical record. The program you are about to see will demonstrate that. As of 2018, such knowledge has become a matter of record. Fragmented in memos, taped conversations, surveillance reports, biographies, and anecdotal remarks to friends and family, and deathbed confessions, but certainly not recorded in the official histories. The purpose of this presentation is to present a sensible and intelligent answer to who and what murdered President Kennedy. It will clarify and interpret some of the newly released information from the JFK Act and the Assassination Records Review Board. It will illustrate and explore some of the independent research from authors who have tried to unravel this 54-year-old homicide. Most of you participating in this lecture are in agreement on one thing: Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone and became a pawn used by greater forces. Now let me just ask you, how many of you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, alone, unaided, killed the President of the United States? David, put your hand down. Oh, who is it? Brian. That's Brian. Okay. How many of you believe that Oswald was involved in this thing? Okay. How many of you don't realize how he was actually involved? Okay. All right. How many of you believe that Cuba had something to do with this? How many of you believe that the Soviet Union had something to do with this? All right, we'll get into that. All right, I just want to at least give you guys kind of an idea. All right, this is the documentation. And you always have this so you can see where I got my research and my research information. JFK came into our lives as a visionary. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. His murder closed the gate to American democracy and opened the door to the fanatic fascism that has infested our country today. Oliver Stone and the media, American journalists and historians. When the debate was raging in the media, Oliver Stone would always argue that the problem with the JFK murder is that no one wants to argue the evidence, which was true since very few journalists or historians had looked at it. That is probable even more true today, since the Assassination Records Review Board has now declassified over 4 million pages of new documents, which has been relatively ignored by the press. Nearly all of this new material backs up the contentions of Stone's film. How many of you have seen the movie JFK? When I was first interviewed about that, it hadn't even been out yet. Somebody, and one of the guys in Dallas asked me, he says, "Well, what do you think of Stone's film?" I said, "I haven't seen it yet. But I said, I can tell you this." I said, "I think Stone's," I said, "I've read all the precursor stuff to that." And I said, he's dealing with Jim Garrison. And I said, "I believe Jim Garrison." And Jim Garrison, his entire trial on a guy by the name of Clay Shaw, Lee Harvey Oswald, and David Ferrie was thwarted and undermined by the Central Intelligence Agency. We now know that. That's what's coming out of the documents. Yeah, we sent CIA agents down there to disrupt the whole damn thing and make Garrison look like an ass. Wow. Okay? Wouldn't that be nice to know that back then? A domestic coup d'etat. President John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963 was not the random act of a lone malcontent, devoid of meaning or political consequences. Rather, it was a domestic coup d'etat carried out by elements of the national security state in reaction to JFK's foreign and military policy, and covered up by the elements of the federal government. The reason JFK was murdered was JFK was pulling out of Vietnam, breaking up the mafia, working for a détente with the USSR, an end to the Cold War, broaching normalizations with relations with Cuba, threatening to scatter the CIA to the four winds in October of 1961 and put Bobby Kennedy in charge of it, pushing racial integration and civil rights, threatening the oil depletion allowance that financed national elections for the oil companies, bucking the Pentagon during the Bay of Pigs planned fiasco, and again during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Firing Allen Dulles, Richard Bissell, and General Charles Cabell from the CIA, firing General Lyman Lemnitzer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, over the Northwoods proposal, working to remove J. Edgar Hoover if he had been reappointed. Standing up to Wall Street and big business during the U.S. Steel strike and on other issues, and giving the people of this country its first sense of hope for an elected leader that might respond to their desire for peace, justice, and change, were the reasons the Pentagon and the CIA had JFK killed. That's where we're going. This is why this is not in American history books. You've got Holt, Mifflin, none of those people would produce these things. Why? Because they're government subsidized. As time passes, more documents become available, and the bare facts of what happens become still clearer. Yet the picture of how things happen becomes harder to reimagine, as the past world, with its preoccupations and uncertainty, it recedes from the remaining memories of it become colored by what happened and what was written about it later. Question: what was the most powerful force in the world in 1963? Lee Harvey Oswald? No. Castro in Cuba? No. The Ku Klux Klan and the John Birch Society? Nope. Organized crime? Nope. Soviet military? Nope. Answer? The most powerful force in the world in 1963 was, and still is, the United States military, with its covert arm, the CIA, and the entire national security state. President Kennedy was surrounded by enemies. As Americans, we did not see the divisions between JFK and his Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is at war with his generals, the CIA, and the entire national security state. President Kennedy encountered major differences of opinion with his Joint Chiefs of Staff over how to solve these military issues: the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Crisis, NATO, interventions in Laos, Cambodia, and then in Vietnam. Products of total war: the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Office of Strategic Service, and later the Central Intelligence Agency were the products of total war, the use of nuclear weapons on a worldwide stage. World War II, in which military solutions were the only solutions, and their side had been victorious. JFK, one generation removed from his military leadership, was acutely aware that this mindset at the Pentagon and CIA were born of a unique conflict in which military solutions had been paramount only because of a total war environment in which diplomacy had already failed. Tactical nuclear weapons becomes an institutional carryover from World War II and promoted by the United States military during the Cold War to protect national security. The Joint Chiefs believed that the development and the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons to protect national security interests was inevitable, and that they could be employed in battle without inevitably leading to general war, which was the euphemism at the time for a full nuclear strategic exchange, maybe what we would call Armageddon. Beginning in 1961, a vicious war was escalating between the Kennedy and the Dulles camps in defining the nation's security. President of the United States versus the Director of CIA. Allen Dulles, Guardian of the Republic. President John F. Kennedy: I want to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Kennedy said that primarily because he asked the CIA, as he came in as president, you want to tell me what's going on down here in Cuba? Oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Nothing's going to happen. You just go right in there and everything's going to be fine. Well, when he got there, guess what? It was a mess. And so Kennedy was backed up against the wall. As the troops over there are getting killed on the beaches there, the military and the CIA is asking, okay, Mr. President, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, we're not going to send in the goddamn military. And the reason is because Cuba's a satellite of Russia. If we start hitting them, we're going to go to World War III. And he goes, what are you guys trying to do? You trying to goad me into this? Yeah. Okay? He saw that. Now, and he sees a problem, a major problem. CIA Director Allen Dulles. That little Kennedy thought he was God. The end result of this war will lead to Dealey Plaza, the altar of national security, and the execution of President Kennedy on Friday, November 22nd, 1963. I am telling you that this is how you have to look at the Kennedy assassination. I know some of you are already there. Some of you don't want to go there because you're sitting back there going, man, you're talking about my country. You're talking about the United States of America. Yes, I am. It's my country, and it's my America too. And I supposedly fought for it. I'm not even sure why. Of course, my dad was a Marine. He says, yours is but to, not to question why, but yours is but to do or die. And I said, God, Dad, do you even ask what the hell's going on, or you just go? And I did throw something at him, because when I got drafted for Vietnam, he says, you need to join the Marines. I said, I don't need to join anything. And I was questioning everything at that time. And then he looked at me and he says, why are you questioning this? Because I said, your war's WW2. This is Vietnam. You have no idea what this is. And he goes, it doesn't matter. I said, yes, it does. Unless you want to take my spot over in Vietnam, take it. Because that's what people did back in 1860, 61, 62, and 63. I'll pay you $600 to take my draft. That's what it cost. Okay? And he looked at me and he goes, that's totally un-American. I said, no, that's American. Go back and read your history. God, you talk about a generation gap. But we closed it probably about 25 years later. Using diplomacy instead of dropping nuclear bombs. God bless, maybe our new president could take some, and I know he can't. In short, the Kennedys believed in seeking a just negotiated peace with the enemy. Their more secret domestic enemies thought peace with justice was impossible or even undesirable. Having faced the total darkness of the planet that was its alternative, John and Robert Kennedy were prepared to wage peace with the same kind of dedication that we normally associate with waging war. A willingness to give their lives for the good of their country. If seeking peace is the resolute way they did, is what makes one an enemy of our national security state, we have all become potential enemies of the state. Anyone can and perhaps should become a peacemaker, thereby becoming the natural enemy of a state whose purpose has become intertwined with waging war. Kennedy's miscalculations. John Kennedy miscalculated an enemy who proved stronger than he. His elimination on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, followed not long afterwards by his brother Robert, fitted the purposes of General Lyman Lemnitzer, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Allen Dulles, former director of the CIA, both fired by President Kennedy. The Cold War intensified. The mission to purify Asia went ahead with refreshed zeal under Lyndon Baines Johnson. The Cold War intensified with Lemnitzer in precisely the right location to make sure that it did. The military-industrial complex is where we're at. General Lyman Lemnitzer, CIA Director Allen Dulles, President Lyndon Johnson, guardians of the Republic. President Kennedy was sacrificed on the altar of national security. Branded as a traitor and deemed unfit to be President of the United States, Kennedy's life was vetoed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, over the years, people say, you have some documents on that. Huh? No, I don't. But I'm making a pretty damn good educated guess. And what is coming out of the National Archives right now is pushing in that direction. Okay? And I used to have history professors yell at me and say, you have to document that. I said, the United States government doesn't document it. I said, all they do is lock things up for 100 years. Well, at least 75. And then they keep locking them up and keep locking them up. In fact, the documents that were supposed to be released in October of this last year, Trump held back 3,000, 4,000 documents. Why? Of course, I told my wife today, I said, we've been fighting for years to try to get those documents out under the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And she looked at me and she goes, "Are you upset about that?" I said, "Not really," because I said, "The documents that we want are not there. They've already destroyed them." She goes, "How do you know that?" I go, "I don't know, but I'm talking about smoking gun documents." We want somebody to be able to say, "Hey, would you grab me a bottle of water?" The torch, JFK, has passed and will rest at Arlington National Cemetery. The creation of the national security state, the Dulles Directive, and the disastrous rise of misplaced power. Defining and explaining national security. The National Security Act of 1947 was a major restructuring of the United States government's military and intelligence agencies following World War II. President Harry S. Truman signs the National Security Act in 1947. Truman's National Security Act, Congress passed legislation establishing the post-World War II national security structure. On July 25, 1947, the National Security Act of 1947 was passed, establishing a linkage between the military, Pentagon, and the National Security Agency, setting up the National Security Council, the NSC, and the CIA, the Department of Defense, and several other new agencies, including the National Military Establishment, with these three separate departments: the Army, the Navy, and the new United States Air Force. And then the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the United States Marine Corps, entered the picture in 1952. The White House, August 10, 1949, in the Oval Office. President Truman signs amendments to the National Security Act in 1947, establishing parameters for the National Security Council, while establishing NATO and placing the security of Europe in the hands of the Pentagon and the CIA. You know, if you read the charter of the CIA, people sit back and say, the CIA has no right to come in the United States and kill people. But they do have the right to go around the entire world and do it. How many of you knew that? And the charter that was set up functions as a covert arm of NATO. So if you're going to look for the assassins of President Kennedy, you don't look for them in the mafia. You better look for them in NATO. Because that's where the CIA can operate legally. They just have to cover them up and bring them over here. That's where we're going, guys. And if you understand where we're going on this, I'm telling you what, you're going to get real close to the assassins of JFK. And here's the thing. After so many years, I really don't care how many people shot him. They shot him and they killed him. They blew his head off. That's exactly what they did. But it is nice to go back and say, okay, was there a guy here? Was there a guy here, 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 and here? According to the evidence that is now being brought out of the National Archives, there was at least 4 shots to President Kennedy's head. One of them from behind. Okay? That, to me, constitutes a conspiracy. What is national security? No one really knows. There is certainly no precise definition of the term. It's actually whatever the government says it is. National security is one of the most meaningless, nebulous, nonsensical terms in the English language, but at the same time, the most important term in the lives of American people. All the government has to do is say national security. And all discussion and debate shuts down. If the government says that national security is at stake, that's the end of the story. Federal judges will immediately dismiss lawsuits as soon as the government claims the case is a threat to national security, Your Honor. Congress will immediately suspend the investigations when the government claims that national security is at stake. The Justice Department will defer to the national security establishment when it raises the issue of national security. National security is a term not even in the Constitution. Undercuts everything. It damages the judiciary. It destabilizes the legislative branch of government. It demoralizes the federal criminal investigations. This nebulous term, whose meaning is whatever the government wants it to be at any particular time, has been made the foundation of American society. National security. What is the national security establishment? It is composed of several agencies, 3 of the main ones being the vast military-industrial establishment, the Pentagon, the CIA, and NATO. These 3 entities have done more to transform American life than anything else. even more than the welfare state, which all of us yell and scream about all the time. But you know what? Some of us are on welfare. They are the entities that enforce the sanctions and embargoes and engage in the invasions, the occupation, the regime changes, operations, coups, assassinations, torture, indefinite incarcerations, renditions, partnership with totalitarian regimes, and executions, all in the name of national security. Just don't bring it home. Do it over there and just don't bring it here. John F. Kennedy's assassination is rooted in our denial of our nation's crimes in World War II that began the Cold War and the nuclear arms race. As a growing precedent to JFK's assassination by his own national security state, we U.S. citizens supported our government when we destroyed whole cities, Hamburg, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. When it protected our Cold War security by world-destructive weapons, and when it carried out the covert murders of foreign leaders with plausible deniability, in a way that was obvious to critical observers. By avoiding our responsibility for the escalating crimes of state done for our security, we who failed to confront the unspeakable opened the door to JFK's assassination and its cover-up. The unspeakable is not far away. The answer and the cause of the execution of President Kennedy lie in the ashes of World War II, the birth of the Cold War, and the creation of the American national security state. Guardians of the Republic. Part 1, the history of things to come. Ending World War II in Europe, 1945, and providing the stage and framework for the execution of President Kennedy in 1963. The dullest trust, a foundation of secrets. OSS, you just look at these things right here. A blueprint for America's secret government, the national security state. Between 1942 and 1947, that's where we're going with this. Chapter 1, American Intelligence, World War II. Behind the front lines, ending World War II in Europe. Alan Dulles, second in command of the OSS. Lyman Lemnitzer, general in the OSS. The American OSS and British MI6, that's where James Bond comes from. Covert intelligence officers connect with key Nazi intelligence generals to bring down the Third Reich and Hitler's reign of terror. How many of you have seen the movie Valkyrie? Do you know who was really behind that? The OSS, Lemnitzer and Dulles. And I can show you their operatives. That's where we're going to go. I'm going to show you how those operatives operated during World War II. And then Dulles reaches in and says, come on over to the United States. But Truman says, you can't bring these people over. Okay? The OSS was built from scratch by some of America's bravest, quirkiest, and most innovative patriots. On June 13, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an executive order creating the Office of Strategic Service. The old office, Coordinator of Information, was dissolved. William Donovan, who left the Army in 1919 as a colonel, was commissioned a general. Under the new arrangement, the head of the office could not be a civilian. The OSS answered directly to the military chiefs of staff, the Pentagon. The official mandate for assassinations is Division 19 of the OSS Codebook. It is under the United States National Research and Development Committee. That's where assassinations and sabotage was. You'd have a hard time trying to find that. The face of American intelligence during World War II, 1942. The face of this American intelligence, the core agencies who played a major role in ending the reign of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich. The Office of Strategic Service, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. These agencies committed thousands of acts of sabotage, targeted killings, and assassinations during World War II in the name of freedom and ending the reign of the Third Reich. I've got no problem with that. We're right in the middle of a world war. But also look at these agencies. Look at American print media, Life. That was the propaganda machine.
Life magazine.
You got it. face of American intelligence during World War II, 1942. These are the core individuals who played a major role ending the reign of Adolf Hitler in the Third Reich. William Donovan, Director of OSS. Lyman Lemnitzer, General OSS. Alan Dulles, Assistant Director of OSS. Tracy Barnes, Lieutenant under Alan Dulles, OSS. Captain Richard Helms, with Dulles in the OSS. General in the OSS under Schaeff is a guy by the name of C.D. Jackson. C.D. Jackson is the editor for Life magazine. There's your propaganda machine. William Quinn, Colonel with Alan Dulles. He's the one who carried out a lot of assassinations. And the station chief in Italy was James Angleton. These men committed thousands of acts of sabotage, targeted killings, assassinations during World War II in the name of freedom and ending the reign of the Third Reich. I've got no problem with that. This is war. It's World War II. The face of American intelligence during the Cold War, 1963. The Defense Department, the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Office of Naval Intelligence, NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Life magazine, the print media, psychological warfare. These agencies committed thousands of acts of sabotage, assassination during the Cold War in the name of national security. There is where I have a problem. All this stuff is done without our knowledge. And guess what? I would guess that if we knew about this, we might be pissed off. Okay? All right. That's why this is not in any of our books. And that's why we only stop at certain places. It's like, should we talk about the Indian Wars? No, we already got them defeated. Let's go on. The face of American intelligence in 1963. Core individuals who played a major role in the execution of President Kennedy and its cover-up. Alan Dulles, Director of the CIA. General Lyman Lemnitzer, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Chairman. Curtis LeMay, Strategic Air Command, Joint Chiefs of Staff. Tracy Barnes, Cuban Project, CIA. Richard Helms, CIA, Director of Covert Intelligence. C.D. Jackson. It was C.D. Jackson, who's the publisher of Life magazine, who gets the Zapruder film. And what does he do with it? He sits on it for 12 years. I had a lot of students say, well, you know, you had that film back in 1963. I said, no, we didn't. We got it because of Geraldo Rivera. He put it out on national TV in 1975, and everybody's going, my God. And he was immediately sued. ABC TV was immediately sued by who? Well, by Life magazine and by the Zapruder family. Life did not want to get involved in this, so they got the Zapruder to sue him. And so when he did sue him, they settled out of court for $1. Why? They don't want to show the damn film. Okay? So we never had the film until 1975. Shoot, by 1970, I have 3 bootleg copies. Now, where did I get them? Well, I can tell you now where I got them, because back then I couldn't, because I had to keep names private. I got them from Penn Jones Jr., who got them from District Attorney of New Orleans, Jim Garrison. Jim Garrison was so pissed off at the United States government for giving him a 40th generation copy of the Zapruder film. He says, I subpoenaed the #1 film. He finally got it. And he was told, by no means can anybody copy this. So all these top researchers at the time, 1967 to 1969, are asking Garrison. And Garrison says, no, you can't copy it. But here's the film. I'm leaving for lunch for about an hour and a half. The film was right here. When I get back, the film better be right there. I will be gone an hour and a half. That's how I got the film. Only I got about an 80th generation copy. It looked like visual mud. Chapter 2, Targeted Killings and Assassination. This is during World War II, guys. At least since World War II, a distinction has been drawn between assassination of civilian leaders and targeted killings of leaders of fighting organizations. Some cases were blurry, such as the British-Czech Operation Anthropoid, the killing of uniformed SS officer Reinhard Heydrich, the acting Reich Protector of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, a failed attempt by British troops to kill Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, was clearly aimed at a military leader, as was the successful shooting down of Admiral Isakuro Yamamoto. Should we add General Patton to this list?
Yeah.
Okay. The Office of Strategic Service, the Office of Naval Intelligence, later the Central Intelligence Agency, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they did their homework in Czechoslovakia in 1942. A blueprint for murder. Operation Anthropoid, a targeted killing. British-trained MI6, James Bond people, okay? And Czech underground assassins directed by American intelligence, the OSS, targeted Reinhard Heydrich, the poster child for Nazism. SS General Reinhard Heydrich, known as the Hangman, Hitler's man in charge of Prague, Czechoslovakia. Operation Anthropoid. Jan Kubis and Josef Gabzik were the two Czech resistance soldiers who were trained by British intelligence, MI6, and guided by American intelligence, OSS, to assassinate General Reinhard Heydrich. How was it done? On May 27, 1942, Heydrich was assassinated, but he died on June 4, 1942. How? A motorcade, a parade route, 2 turns, a hairpin turn, slowing the car, multiple shooters, multiple shots, and an ambush from a grassy knoll. Blueprint for murder? Does this World War II targeted killing assassination scenario seem familiar? Fingerprints of American intelligence? Assassination of John F. Kennedy, November 22nd, 1963. A motorcade, a parade route, 2 turns, a hairpin turn, slowing the car, multiple shooters, multiple shots, and an ambush from a grassy knoll. Kennedy was murdered while he rode in an open limousine in Dallas, Texas. Fingerprints of American intelligence. Chapter 3. Organized crime in the Office of Naval Intelligence. Operation Underworld. The Office of Naval Intelligence organized crime in the alliance with the Mafia. Okay, Naval Intelligence Commander Half-Lieutenant Charles Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. In order to prevent enemy sabotage at home during World War II, the U.S. government secretly enlisted the help of an unlikely partner, the Mafia. The New York shipping docks in February of 1942, the SS Normandy, a luxury liner being converted to a troop transport, caught fire and sank at her moorings at the New York waterfront. The destruction of the Normandy convinced the Navy it needed Luciano's cooperation. Commander Halfinen and Meyer Lansky approached Luciano in prison to see if his power and influence could secure the New York docks and prevent labor strikes. With Luciano's cooperation, the United States Navy gained access and supervision of the dockyards. There were no labor strikes throughout the war, and all acts of sabotage ceased to exist. Governor Thomas Dewey. The secret wartime collaboration of the Mafia and the U.S. Navy. On January 3, 1946, a reward for his wartime cooperation, Governor Thomas E. Dewey reluctantly commuted Luciano's pandering sentence on condition that he does not resist deportation to Italy. Luciano accepted the deal, although he still maintained that he was a U.S. citizen and not subject to deportation. On February 2, 1946, 2 federal immigration agents transported Luciano from Sing Sing prison to Ellis Island in New York Harbor for deportation proceedings. A 1954 report ordered by Governor Dewey stated that Luciano provided many valuable services to naval intelligence. Thomas Dewey, is going to run for the presidency. Governor of New York, mafia gangbuster, presidential candidate 1948 against Truman. Thomas Dewey was the gangbuster and New York prosecutor who put Luciano in jail, and then later petitioned for his release and deportation to Italy in honor of his wartime services. In 1948, Dewey ran for the president in a close race against Harry Truman. Dewey's vice presidential candidate was Earl Warren, and his campaign manager was Allen Dulles. His base for financial support came from John J. McCloy, Chase Manhattan Bank. Chapter 4, General George S. Patton Jr. and the conquest of Italy, World War II. Benito Mussolini and the Third Reich. Mussolini arrested Italian godfathers and allied Italy with Nazi Germany. This resulted in the conviction of 147 persons, 7 of whom received life and hard labor, 8 receiving sentences of 30 years, and an additional 5 getting 25 years. So he has the power at that time to arrest all of the godfathers, the Italian mafia in Italy. Patton uses the alliance with the mafia, World War II Office of Naval Intelligence, and the Office of Strategic Service, OSS. General Patton was one of the greatest military generals during World War II. As he marched through Italy, he did the quickest thing necessary to control the Allied conquest. He released the Italian godfathers from Nazi control and placed in each Italian city an Italian business leader loyal to the United States of America, the Italian Mafia. Okay? He left the United States Army military police behind at each town to help disperse United States government rations through these Italian business leaders. Each Italian town and leader were under the protection of General Patton. Each town was controlled by the local Italian mafia, and the new leadership came from Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Vito Genovese. The military rations included food, cigarettes, silk stockings, gas, medical supplies, etc. It would later include alcohol, guns, and drugs, all under the protection of the OSS and the Office of Naval Intelligence. Then covered up after 1947 by our National Security Act and protected by the CIA. The creation of the black market. Chapter 5, Project Paperclip. OSS Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip, a successful joint American intelligence operation through the Pentagon, military intelligence, the Office of Strategic Service, and German intelligence, known as the Abwehr. It brought to the United States literally thousands of top aerospace and munitions experts from Nazi Germany and Nazi Abwehr spies to form the U.S. corporate leadership and the expertise behind the technological and military advances of our growing military-industrial complex. Now, I've got no problem with bringing these people over here, you know, scientists and this. I got no problem with that. But when you start bringing Nazi spies over, and that's what Truman said, no Nazis. You're going to see that here, okay? No Nazis. The Dulles transaction, the secret agreement between the American OSS and the Nazi Abwehr, led by Allen Dulles, second in command of the OSS, U.S. Intelligence, 1943 in Bern, Switzerland, and Reinhard Gehlen, SS General, Abwehr, Nazi Intelligence. Is this in any of our history books? Absolutely, absolutely not. In fact, Gehlen can't hardly even be found. American intelligence gains access to World War II Nazi intelligence and its infrastructure known as the Gehlen Network. Or, let's make a deal. Okay. Both Allen Dulles and Reinhard Gehlen came from affluent families. These families sent their sons to the best school money could buy. Oxford University in England was their finishing school. Both were trained in business, finance, and law. They were classmates and studied British intelligence, MI5 and MI6. Allen and Reinhardt will travel to the United States and finish their apprenticeship for Sullivan and Cromwell, top U.S. law firm located at Rockefeller Center. Their mentor is Sullivan and Cromwell top lawyer and Rockefeller banker, John J. McCloy. Why a secret deal between the OSS and the Abwehr? Dulles and Galen knew and worked with each other since college days at Oxford University. Each of these men were at the top of their country's intelligence services. Each had power and authority, and they both knew that Germany in 1943 was going to lose World War II. The Americans and the Soviets had already allied themselves to each other in order to defeat the Third Reich. See, that's the thing that I think a lot of history students miss. We were allies with the Soviet Union during World War II. Then what happened? We flipped. You're going to find out why we flipped. Because if I was the Soviet Union and the United States of America stabbed me in the back, I would have done the same damn thing. That's what's not taught. Because, you know, the communists are bad. And they don't believe in God. They're godless people. I.G. Farben, the chemical manufacturing of Zyklon B, poison gas used in the Nazi death camps, and its associated companies were among the Nazi-era corporations that did business with Sullivan and Cromwell. Their chief contact at the firm was an attorney named John Foster Dulles, who became Secretary of State in the Eisenhower administration. Sullivan and Cromwell thrived on its cartels and collusion with the new Nazi regime. Says the firm's chroniclers, in 1933 and 1934, when the Nazis' brutal course was obvious, Dulles let off cables to his German clients with the salutation, Heil Hitler! In 1935, he scribed a screed for the Atlantic Monthly magazine dismissing the Nazi state terrorism as changes we recognize to be inevitable. Sullivan and Cromwell. These lawyers, John Foster Dulles, Allen Dulles, John J. McCloy, and Reinhard Galen, these lawyers helped broker a $250 million loan to Adolf Hitler in Germany from Chase Manhattan Bank. This loan would help depressed, torn Germany rebuild its infrastructure and the Third Reich. The loan paved its way for a number of American corporations to heavily invest in Nazi Germany. Who did they loan it to? Adolf Hitler. What did he build? He built, well, we'll just show you. We'll just show you what he built. These companies come over. These American companies come over because this is business. But we're right in the middle of this goddamn thing called WW2. Standard Oil goes over there. Chase Manhattan Bank's got to go over there. IT&T, Westinghouse, Mobil Oil, Ford Motor Company, General Electric, J.P. Morgan. American corporations are now invested in Germany. And the ball bearing plants that I used to laugh at when I was watching Hogan's Heroes, when he would get all this information and give it to the Americans to bomb these plants, he says, you guys are never bombing these damn plants. You know why? We own them. We own the damn plants. Don't destroy your infrastructure. That's where we make money, and then we turn around, and then we give you money. We make money over here. Oh, God. I don't even want to get into today. I don't think I can. We're not making the world safe for democracy. We're making it safe for capitalism and those who own it. You own it? No. No, we just, God bless America, and we sure as hell don't want to kneel during the national anthem, do we? Operation Paperclip. America's secret deal with Nazi Germany. The Dulles transaction, part 1. Rockefeller had insurance to get his $250 million back. And the reason Rockefeller wanted the money back is we've already made a deal with the Russians. And we're going to let the Russians come in from the Eastern Front. If the Russians get to Berlin before we do, they get the money. Got it? They get all the money. And believe me, Nazi Germany has taken a lot of money. Okay? It's in gold. All right? scientists would come to the U.S., 1,000 plus. In aerospace, B-1, B-2 rockets, which will later become National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Chemical, biological, sarin, gas, and the contaminants that we now have all over the world. And my God, if somebody gets those things, man, there's your terrorism. Hell, we built it. Engineering and design, Saturn rockets, space shuttle design. Hell, they had a space shuttle design back in 1944, sitting at Peenemünde, sitting right outside Nordhausen. Physics, physicists, jet propulsion. 5,000 Abwehr agents, spies to the United States. 5,000 Abwehr agents, spies to the United States. Where in God's name did they go? Operation Paperclip, Part 2. All Nazi intelligence files and counterintelligence agents would be brought in by Reinhard Gehlen. This is the blue chips that Gehlen is laying out to Dulles. He goes, you guys know that our country's killing millions and millions of Jews. I didn't have anything to do with it. He didn't. But he's still a Nazi general, and he's an SS general, and he's one of the top generals there. He said, what do you need? We need all of these files. Well, Germans were second to nobody at keeping files. So Americans will get all of these files. You know where they're at? In the National Archives. You ever see them? Oh, but we live in America, right? You want to try to get into them? Now, I kept going to school to get more degrees in order to become a PhD so that I could go to the United States government and say, look, I would like to be able, I have my PhD, I would like to be able to get into these files. Could you give me a congressional hearing and let me go into these files? You gotta be kidding me. I never got that far. I said, I'm tired of going to school. Reinhard Gehlen, Nazi, 3-star general. You're going to take him directly to the Pentagon and become a 3-star United States Army general. Boom, just like that.
Was that what happened?
Yeah, I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes. At the end of World War II, Gehlen will return to Germany as head of the German intelligence, BND, for the United States. Good God, we are trying to support the Nazi hunters, the Jewish Nazi hunters. We're trying to support them, and we're trying to put these guys away. We're playing both ends of the game. Okay? No, this is not the guy that you think he is. No, in fact, he's one of us. Okay? That's why Gehlen's name is very, very seldom known in American history. Oh my God, I'm telling you what, this is what we did, guys. I've been teaching this in high school for the last 45 years. Of course, I would always get, some of my students would come back and mom and dad said, Mom and Dad wants to talk to you about American history. And I said, oh, another 8th grade student that didn't pay attention to anything in school and now wants to question me. I said, bring him in, let's go. Well, you're teaching about Nazism. Oh, Jesus Christ, do you know what Nazism is? I said, you don't even know what communism is. Oh, we don't, but God, we don't want to hear it. If you don't know what it is, how do you know what it is? Okay? I had good, solid Americans that said, oh, you're doing an injustice to America. Am I? Well, I might be, because I'll tell you what, after you get out of this course tonight, you might sit back and start thinking about everything that's going on. The U.S. employs the Gehlen Org, a black orchestra of spies, a covert agency under NATO. No prosecution for any of these Nazis. Oh, but we did prosecute Nazis, didn't we? And I think we hanged probably 21 of them. Justice, right? Where's Rockefeller's $250 million loan? General Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's #1 foreign intelligence officer, will spend the next 1.5 years depleting Germany of every ounce of gold and Reichsmarks in every German bank. He hides $9 trillion in gold bullion in caves in the Bavarian Alps. General Gehlen has access to all of the Nazi banks. He is Hitler's right-hand man in intelligence. He is a 3-star general in the SS and can produce secret orders from Berlin to confiscate the gold. He has access to the timing and scheduling of American troop movements through Germany presents from Allen Dulles. God forbid that I would desecrate the American soldiers from going into battle during the Battle of the Bulge. But it was all fixed. We held back until Galen can get all the goddamn gold out. And Patton is pissed to the max. He gets in front of Eisenhower and he goes, "What in God's name are you doing? We could have been there in 1943. What are you doing?" Oh, there's a rift between, you see the rift between Patton and Eisenhower? Okay. Why? Why is this? Because Dulles wants the Russians, he doesn't want them to get the gold. The spoils of war and Rockefeller's money. Nazi General Reinhard Galen surrenders to the Allied powers. When the Allies end World War II in Europe, Nazi General Galen presents himself to the nearest POW camp. And this is by design. Two weeks after the war is already over, here comes Reinhard Galen. He's about 5'6". He's a skinny little guy, probably maybe about 120, 125 pounds. And he's dressed in a yodeler's outfit. Okay? Top hat and everything, down to the spats and everything, and he's come walking in. And they're sitting there going, "Yes, sir, what can we do for you?" So I was part of the German officer group. "Who are you?" He doesn't really want to give his name out because everybody wants him. Well, who wants him? The Russians. When they get into Berlin, because if you go back to your history book, Americans didn't take Berlin. Russia took it. And when Russia got there, they're going, "Where the hell's the gold?" Damn Americans got here before us. Yes, they did. Through who? Well, we didn't take it. Maybe Galen took it. Of course, that's by design too. Okay? But he didn't just take $250 million worth of gold bullion. He took $9 trillion worth of gold bullion. People, this is 1945. Okay? All right. So, Galen presents himself to the nearest POW camp. He spends 2 weeks in this camp awaiting contact from Allen Dulles. The Russians and Americans are both looking for him. The Russians know he has taken the gold, and the Americans need to protect him. Allen Dulles sends a MI6 OSS, British and American intelligence agent, to retrieve him. Colonel Clay Shaw picks up General Galen and delivers him to the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. within 24 hours. Galen is stripped of his Nazi generalship and presented with a 3-star U.S. Army uniform. He repays Hitler's loan, $250 million to John J. McCloy at the Chase Bank in New York City, which was owned by the Rockefeller family. In 1963, Clay Shaw is CIA. Shaw was babysitting Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans. By 1967, New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison charges Clay Shaw in a conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. It is the premise for Oliver Stone's blockbuster movie, JFK 1991. And the critics are saying, "You have no idea." Well, you know what? It's not taught in our American history book. It's in the National Archives. Would you like to get in here and see this stuff? God, guys, I swear to God, if I ever got in the National Archives, this would be the last you see me. Because I'll become a part of the wall. Because I will want to expose everything. The bad part about it is, you just won't see me. Of course, you're probably wondering, how in the hell am I still here now? Okay? Guys, before we get started, I do want to introduce you to my co-author of our book, that we wrote on Ed Hoffman, Beyond the Fence Line, and he's here tonight. And he's a surveillance officer, so he's out always surveilling people. But this is Brian Edwards. Brian, you want to come out and say a couple words and then get out of here?
A couple.
Oh yeah, really? I give you a spot. I gave Dave a spot.
Hi. How are you this evening? It's good to stand up. I've been sitting in a car for 11 and a half hours. I got together 132 years ago, I think. And so I kind of tagged along with him when Casey was teaching school, and we took kids to Dallas and talked to witnesses, and kind of got our brains flowing and thought, you know, we ought to write a book. We should write a book. I've always wanted to write a book. It was on my bucket list. So we decided that we were going to write a book about a guy who was kind of overlooked in 1963 and had a lot to say. Actually, he didn't have anything to say because he was deaf mute, but he had a lot to say about what he saw that day. And so we decided that we were going to ask him if we could write his story. And he was gracious enough, and it was all excited about somebody who was going to take his story and have it on the record. So now we have his book, or have our book, and unfortunately Ed passed away in 2009 or 10, I think. But anyway, Casey, the brains of the organization, he came up with the title, Beyond the Fence. What a great idea. What a great idea. And so we were mapping out how we're going to, what do we want to do about the, we want to show the fence, and we want to have that part of the, we didn't even think about a book cover, we were just thinking how we're going to show that. And so Casey decided that Beyond the Fence Line was a great title. I agreed, and our publisher said that's a great thing to do. So he says, well, I got an idea for the cover. And so we laid it out and kind of storyboarded it. He said we were going to have a shooter stand behind the fence, like what Ed Hoffman saw. And my brain was already thinking, okay, you got the title, you came up with the title, and your name's going to be first on the cover. But I'm thinking there's going to be a challenge as far as getting the picture to come to fruition, because you can't see over the fence. So we kind of let somebody a little taller stand in, so I got to be on the cover. Anyway,
So you were the shooter?
no, I was only 7 years old in Overland Park, Kansas, so I had an alibi. I was the channel changer on my television, my dad. But my background is I started studying it in 1969 when I was in 8th grade, and I had to do a book report, and I picked the Kennedy assassination because I'd read one whole book on it called Rush to Judgment, and I thought I was the authority in my house about the Kennedy assassination. And I remember my dad and mom went to Kansas City Star and got The Torches Passed. Some of you may have had that, little, about that thick, but it's a hardback book, you know, and I just stared at that book every day. And I read it back and forth. And when I was in junior high school, I wrote this book report, 100 pages. I wrote 100 pages in longhand. This is before computers and abacuses and all that. And I actually wrote 100 pages, and I think, maybe that was what I'm supposed to, maybe that's my thing, my calling, I guess. But anyway, my background is law enforcement. I was a police officer in Lawrence, Kansas for 22 years, and I only recognize one of you in here, so that's really good. That's good. That's usually there's 4 or 5. But my area that I just enjoyed the whole story. I don't enjoy it, but the Dallas police and the forensics, and part of my background was not only as a police officer, but I was also a sniper on the assault team for 7 years.
There's the book, guys.
And
That's him up there, so. I couldn't see over the fence.
no, we couldn't see over the fence. But so on the next go round, March 7th, is that what?
March 7th, yeah.
March 7th. Do not miss that one because we're going to talk about the Ed Hoffman story, and it's a fascinating, sad story because of what he saw, what he tried to tell people, and nobody took him at his word because he had a disability. But it's like the line in JFK where Kevin Costner's character tells Al Orster, his sidekick, he says, just because a woman's a prostitute doesn't mean she's not a good witness. The same way with Ed, it's because he had a disability doesn't mean he didn't see what he saw. So I just want to give you that, whet your appetite, so don't miss on the 7th, because it will really fascinate you about how that somebody saw what he saw, and nobody believed him. What else do you want me?
You want to plug the national thing we're going?
Oh, we're going to, Casey and I have been asked to speak at another conference in Washington DC on March 9th, 10th, and 11th. Not all 3 days we're going to speak, but the one day we're going to speak. We're also going to I got a ride, the George Bush Intelligence, the Center of Intelligence. We're going to go out there and stand by this billboard and go, we want in.
That's as close as we're going to
That's as close as we're going to get. But yeah, we've been asked to speak there, and then we're doing this, and then every year we speak at the Lancer Conference in Dallas, and it keeps me active, keeps me off the street and out of trouble, so it's a good thing. And I'm working on another book that I haven't told Casey about because it's a secret, and now I've let the secret out. But I'm working on another book. And Casey and I think we're going to probably, he doesn't know it yet, but I think we're going to start another book here this summer. I've got a couple ideas, but anyway, it's fascinating because I heard somebody ask, do you think the files will ever be released? Well, the files are coming out, but the problem with that, as soon as President Trump released all these files, I bet I got 10 emails, 40 phone calls. Oh, did you see Trump release the files? Yeah. So you got to know what you're looking at. It's going to take months to go through them all. You got to know how it fits in the puzzle, and then you got to know what it means on the piece of paper. And then you've got to figure out if that's an actual document or if it's a planted thing that's been in there for 4 years, 2 days or 40 years. So that's the problem. To me, it's not. It's just it's a paper tiger for me. I don't really get that much into it. But anyway, I had a thought when I was sitting back there. I had a thought, but now I don't have a thought. But is there anything else you'd like me to say, or just say shut up, or I need to go sit down?
You need to go sit down. But at the same time, he's coming back on March 7th, and we'll do Ed Hoffman at that time, and I think we might have time for David to do his Lancer presentation. He's going to be a newbie down here doing a Lancer presentation, but he's got brand new material, and I said, you got it, you run it. So we'll bring that out. So
you ever had somebody from the CIA in one of your groups?
I had 2 military persons in who I believe were connected to CIA, but military intelligence. Basically, they stayed at a conference that a program that I gave for 4 hours, and I was one of those guys who said, I will sit here and answer all the questions because I could at the time, because I was a teacher and I had access to the building. I don't have access to the building here, so. But it's one of those things that these guys told me. They said, you were talking about this type of a bullet and this type of a rifle that was fired, and one of them said, we've seen bullets, and this was probably 30 years ago. They said, that's an exploding round. And they said, that's a military issue bullet. And nobody had access to those back in 1963, but military.
So they didn't get mad with the angry or?
They did. In fact, one of them said, we were talking about the possibility of an umbrella gun. And one of the guys says, hey, he says, you have my daughter in class, how would you like me to build you an umbrella gun? I said that I could use in class.
The thing about, you were asking about whether the CIA or anybody like that's been in our group. Well, first of all, we wouldn't know. And it's like, if you're in the mafia, you don't tell people you're in the mafia. But you get that, you get a sense of people standing in the back and they don't sit down, but they're taking notes and they just look like they don't belong. Those are the folks that we would want to know about. The folks that
Probably
wear suit and tie.
Probably your new lady friend that you got down there. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I worked for Blue Valley Schools, and our security guy used to be with the CIA, and he was on some presidential things. And so when he retired, the room was full of CIA. And when I
Gene Hill was followed by the FBI until the day she died. And that was,
Marina's been being followed
And-
ever
yeah.
since.
Ferris Rixville is following her all over the place. So, crazy stuff. Anyway, thank you, Brian, for coming in. Mick, you wanted to?
Thunderize for the first speech and the second speech. Out here, they're for sale, and just fit right into the computer.
Oh, yeah.
Look at it.
Yeah, the thumb drives of each of these programs that I'm doing, well, I'm selling those for $20 a piece. If you would like them, you get the exact same thing that I'm showing you here. But then David's also videotaping this whole thing, so depending on where you want to go, but for $20 bucks you can have this for your own little thing. Then you can be investigated by the whoever. All right, lights, camera, action. Here we go. Chapter 6, guys, brass target. General Patton, a targeted killing, assassination by American intelligence at the end of World War II. Remember, these men, these agencies committed thousands of acts of sabotage, targeted killings, assassination during World War II in the name of the Allied powers. Patton criticizes Eisenhower. General Patton's outspoken hatred of the Soviets led him to being sidelined as the war drew to a close. Patton was threatening to quit the Army and denounce Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight David Eisenhower once his junior and close friend, who he believed, along with the generals at Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAEF, had made a deal with the Soviets to stop him racing them to Berlin. This left hundreds of thousands of German troops free to escape to kill U.S. troops in what is known as the Battle of the Bulge, and let the Russians take Eastern Europe, which they did. The Battle of the Bulge took approximately 6 months to execute and complete. General Patton complained at General Eisenhower that he could have ended World War II in Europe in 1943. I believe he could have. He believed that General Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, SHAEF, made a deal with the Russians to delay American advancement to Berlin and end World War II. He did. General Eisenhower relieves General Patton of duty commanding the Third Army. Patton had made many high-ranking enemies in Moscow, enemies of these guys. Berlin, London, Washington, D.C. Patton's fiery determination to speak the truth made many powerful men squirm, not only during the war, but afterwards. General Patton was a threat to the Allies and the New World Order. Geez, this sounds Orwellian. Patton made public statements praising the German army for their matchless skills in fighting, while criticizing the Soviet Union as the real enemy of freedom. Some of the top brass, the Pentagon generals, and politicians believed that General Patton was a threat to their New World Order. SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. That's what SHAEF stands for. Patton was correct about General Eisenhower and the generals at SHAEF. General Patton was correct, but not entirely right, about a deal arranged with the Russians. It was Allen Dulles' secret deal with Nazi General Reinhard Gehlen, who depleted every German bank and confiscated all of its gold bullion and Reichsmarks. The Black Eagle Trust, that's the Nazi gold. $9 trillion worth of Nazi Eagle gold. General George S. Patton discovers $250 million of Black Eagle gold, Nazi gold, just the tip of the iceberg in a cave in the Bavarian Alps, and orders the Army's CID, Criminal Investigation Division, to collect it for the Allies. He answers directly to the personnel at SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, governed by General Eisenhower, General Lemnitzer, General Donovan, and Allen Dulles of the OSS, Office of Strategic Service. Brass target, General Patton. On December 9, 1945, General George S. Patton Jr. is traveling in a small motorcade. His staff car makes two back-to-back 90-degree turns and is severely injured in an intentional collision when a 2.5-ton GMC Army truck, which had been parked facing the German general's car, roared into action and violently collided with the general's staff car. Brass target, General Patton. General Patton Patton is flung forward from the back seat, his head slamming violently into the steel partition behind the driver's compartment. His nose broke, and he felt a sharp pain in the back of his neck. He has no sensation in the lower half of his body. General Patton knew instantly that he was paralyzed. Patton was the only person injured in the collision. A motorcade with two back-to-back 90-degree turns. Does this sound familiar? Was Patton murdered? The Nazi gold disappears. Patton sustained a broken neck and dies on December 21st, 1945. The Nazi gold disappears. Read the book, The Algonquin Project, or see the film Brass Target. OSS Major Douglas Bazada, agent and field operative during World War II. 1979, OSS agent field operative Major Douglas Bazada claimed that he had been part of a hit team that was tasked to assassinate General Patton. Major Bazada met with General Donovan, commander of the OSS, at the Claridge Hotel in London. He was given verbal orders to assassinate General Patton. Bazada asked General Donovan, "Shall I kill him, sir?" General Donovan replied, "Yes, Douglas, you do exactly what you must." OSS Black Ops assassin, Major Bazada, fired a low-velocity projectile into the back of General Patton's neck in order to snap the neck and cause paralysis. A hard rubber bullet. Some of the bullets that we would use in some of the riots during the 1960s, 1968 conventions to fire into. And it'd be nice if we would start using those nowadays, because it'll stop you, it won't kill you. However, if it's hit in the right spot, it could break your neck. Major Bazada and Soviet NKVD agents. General Patton was taken to a hospital in Heidelberg. He had a compressed fracture and dislocation of the third and fourth cervical vertebra, resulting in a broken neck and spinal cord injury that rendered him paralyzed from the neck down. He spent most of the next 12 days in spinal traction to decrease spinal pressure. When Patton failed to die and was showing signs of recovery, he was murdered in the hospital by Soviet NKVD agents. General Donovan, OSS, paid Bazada $10,000 plus another $800 in expenses for his role in Patton's death. Author-historian Robert Wilcox says General Donovan, commander of the Office of Strategic Service, forerunner of the CIA, ordered assassin Douglas Bazada to kill Patton. Wilcox interviewed Bazada, who died in 1999, and was granted access to his diaries. In his book, Target Patton, Robert Wilcox cites diary entries which apparently revealed that Bazada arranged for the truck to plow into Patton's car, then broke his neck with a rubber bullet gun. Bazada said that when Patton began to recover, U.S. officials turned a blind eye as the Russian agents poisoned him. No autopsy was performed. Chapter 7, Operation Sunrise. Ending World War II in Europe, the OSS clandestine and covert intelligence 1943 to 1945, Nazis, Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, and the Office of Strategic Service. Governed by the OSS out of Switzerland, the OSS negotiated the surrender of all German troops in northern Italy. Operation Sunrise, bringing down Hitler, key players at the German surrender, ending World War II. They are Lyman Lemnitzer, General OSS, Alan Dulles, Second in Command of the OSS, Richard Helms, OSS agent, William Quinn, OSS, Tracy Barnes, OSS. Here we have General Karl Wolf, Swiss Intelligence Officer Max Weigel, and OSS General Lyman Lemnitzer. Keys to understanding the execution of President Kennedy in 1963. Same players, different stage. CIA Director Alan Dulles, Joint Chiefs of Chairman General Lyman Lemnitzer, CIA Domestic Contacts Case Officer Clay Shaw, Covert Intelligence Officer Richard Helms, CIA Domestic Operations Officer Tracy Barnes, Covert National Security Intelligence Operations during the Cold War. Chapter 8, VE Day, May 8, 1945, VJ Day, September 2nd, 1945. victory in Europe. Allied World War II covert and clandestine intelligences, including the OSS, ONI, the Pentagon, and Nazi intelligence, is protected and concealed by Allen Dulles. He is the guardian of the Bank of Secrets. Hiroshima, August 6, 1945, and Nagasaki, August 9, 1945, ending World War II with Japan with the atomic bomb. The United States emerges as the #1 military power in the world. To maintain this military power, we create the national security state. The United States kept our atomic bombs a secret from the Russians until after they were deployed against Japan. The U.S. had allied with the Russians in order to defeat the Nazis. The Russians were communists. The U.S. never trusted them and never let them know what we were doing in the area of atomic energy. The Russians, our allies, lost over 20 million lives defending Stalingrad against the Nazis, the Eastern Front, while the United States was fighting the Japanese in the Pacific. In light of this atomic secret, the United States created a bitter enemy in the Soviet Union, and so began the Cold War. We will spend the next 70 years stockpiling nuclear weapons, WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, in preparation for a thermonuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. Our national security system drove the United States into a $23 trillion national debt. Good luck in paying for that. Chapter 9, the Cold War, America's new enemy, communism. The Dulles establishment protecting America's hidden assets. By September 2nd, 1945, our new enemy is communism. Our secret Nazi alliance is already in place. This is the beginning of America's involvement in the Cold War. Operation Paperclip and Richard Nixon. Newly elected Congressional Representative Richard M. Nixon in 1946 helped protect Operation Paperclip, the Nazis, the OSS, the Office of Naval Intelligence, later the CIA, and the National Security State, and the entire hidden infrastructure of the Galen Network. In order to depose these Nazis, they hired Henry Kissinger and a guy by the name of Fritz Kramer. A lot of these Nazi spies came out of Peenemünde or Nordhausen, and along with them was Colonel Werner von Braun, Richard Nixon, guardian of the Republic. Between 1945 and 1952, at the end of World War II, the United States played both ends of the game. We prosecuted the Nazis for atrocious war crimes and hid from ourselves and the world some of the Nazis we would later use to control the world in war, space, biology, physics, engineering, aerospace, chemical and biological contaminants, terrorism, torture, murder, and medical experiments. The United States controlled the High Commissioner of Germany at the end of World War II. The United States of America placed the fate of the Nazi war criminals in the hands of these four powerful men. John J. McCloy was a New York Chase Bank president. His bank was owned and controlled by the Rockefellers. He was appointed High Commissioner of Germany after the victory in Europe. General William Donovan was commander of the OSS, Office of Strategic Service, America's wartime intelligence agency. Later became the CIA. Allen Dulles was OSS Station Chief of Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force and second in command of General Donovan. Telford Taylor was the chief prosecutor for the Allies. John J. McCloy, godfather of the American establishment. He once said, "The Constitution is just a scrap of paper to me." That was McCloy's response to U.S. Attorney General Biddle on the Japanese internment camps in California. John J. McCloy, High Commissioner of Germany after World War II, he pardoned key Nazi criminals like Krupp, Abs, Dornberger, and Schatt, and others. His long career has made him the godfather of the American establishment. He was the top lawyer for Sullivan and Cromwell. He sat atop the World Bank, directed construction of the Pentagon, worked with Earl Warren to set up the Japanese concentration camps in America, blocked any military attacks on the Nazi death camps as Assistant Secretary of War. He stopped the summary execution of essential Nazis Nazis during the Nuremberg trials and was a vital member of the Warren Commission investigating the assassination of President Kennedy. John J. McCloy, Guardian of the Republic. SS General Walter Dornberger, a Nazi murderer convicted at Nuremberg for working with the butcher of Auschwitz, Josef Mengele, to kill 6,000 Jews. He was scheduled to be hanged according to prosecutor Shawcross. He had been a mentor and friend to Werner von Braun throughout the war, getting materials and labor denied at times for the rocket works. Von Braun refused to work on National Aeronautics' space rockets unless we intervened to save Dornberger. Of course we did, with a full pardon, and it was arranged by John J. McCloy. SS General Walter Dornberger came to the United States, worked at National Aeronautics and Space Administration briefly, and then became director of the helicopter division of Bell Aerospace in Dallas and Houston, Texas. He trained pilots abroad, working with dictators like the Shah of Iran. Dornberger employed top-ranking military intelligence agents, Michael Payne, who housed Marina Oswald in his home in Irving, Texas. Marina, who married Lee Harvey Oswald in Russia, lived in Minsk, Bielorussia, and was the niece of a top officer in the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. Her family was openly anti-communist. The Vietnam War, this is just a sidebar here. The Vietnam War cost $700 billion. Vietnam was a helicopter war. Over 5,086 helicopters were destroyed by the enemy. Bell model U.S. Army helicopter UH, Army assault helicopter known as the Huey helicopter, over 3,000 of those were destroyed at a cost to the American taxpayers of $16 billion. Bell Helicopter also made the CH-47 transport helicopter known as the Chinook, cost of $39 million each, for a total of $13 billion in losses. President Truman's order after World War II, no Nazis in America. Allen Dulles had to find some secure place to hide his Nazis before President Truman signed the National Security Act. Where do you think he'd hide them?
Plain sight.
Almost, but nobody would look in plain sight. Dulles hid his Nazis in the United States Army. 680th Historical Division, it was the way station for the transfer of Nazis in America, from upstate New York to Texas. Operation Paperclip. Allen Dulles, Guardian of the Republic. Nazi scientists to Fort Bliss, Texas, Project Paperclip, a covert operation from 1943 to 1942, run by the OSS, now by the CIA. It brought over two familiar people, Werner von Braun and Arthur Rudolph. Dulles hid most of his Nazis in Texas. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Chapter 10, tied up in Nazis. The Galen Network, known as the Galen Org, hidden Nazi assets. The Galen Network, known as the Galen Org, the hidden new arm of the OSS and military intelligence, later the CIA, the Pentagon, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Major General Reinhard Galen, Pentagon General, United States Army, Cold War, Dulles' foreign intelligence officer, in charge of German intelligence for the United States, put back into Germany in 1954. Allen Dulles and Reinhard Galen created the right arm of the CIA. None of this is presented in our American history books. Reinhard Galen, Pentagon General. Allen Dulles, Guardian of the Republic. Galen Network, a black orchestra of spies whose infamous dealings during World War II had put the Nazi spies in bed with every major intelligence network in the world, from British MI5 and MI6 to American OSS and heavily infiltrated Russian KGB. Under the evil genius of Allen Dulles, whose espionage attacks on the Soviet Union date back to the 1920s, $250 million in Rockefeller and Mellon funds were directed into the hands of Hitler's spy master Reinhard Galen and his 5,000 Nazi spies. These spies were protected by the Pentagon, who formed and founded our Central Intelligence Agency and the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1947. Later, these same forces created post-war European intelligence, NATO, our defense intelligence agency, and covert groupings here and abroad. They were protected on Capitol Hill by patriotic Senator Richard Russell, who sat on the Warren Commission, and Congressman Richard Nixon. Chapter 11, Allen Dulles and Lyman Lemnitzer and the establishment of NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, Operation Gladio, the stay-behind armies post-World War II. Supreme Headquarters Allied power in Europe. It was changed to that after the war was over. Then they created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The formation and foundation of NATO. After World War II, Great Britain, Winston Churchill, and the United States General Eisenhower decided to create stay-behind paramilitary organizations. All of the resistance forces in Europe during World War II, with the official aim of countering a possible Soviet invasion through espionage, through sabotage and guerrilla warfare behind enemy lines. Arms caches were hidden, escape routes prepared, and loyal members recruited, whether in Italy or in other European countries. It was funded by the American military intelligence, including the OSS, the ONI, and the Galen Org. Its clandestine cells were to stay behind in enemy-controlled territory and to act as resistant movements, including sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and assassinations. General Lemnitzer and Allen Dulles were instrumental in establishing NATO and Gladio. The underground, the resistance, before, during, and after World War II. Resistance movements during World War II occupied every country by a variety of means, ranging from non-cooperation, disinformation, and propaganda, to hiding crashed pilots, and even to outright warfare and targeted kills, which we now call assassinations, and the recapturing of towns. In many countries, resistant movements were sometimes referred to as the underground. A network of paramilitary groups. At the end of World War II, the CIA, MI6, the Nazis, and other Allied spooks terrorized Europe in anything goes war against communists. NATO cooperated with the CIA, MI6, and other European intelligence agencies to set up a network of paramilitary groups throughout Europe to stop the growth of communism in Western Europe. Ex-Nazis, the Galen Org, and other fascists made up the mass of agents, including infamous banker Lico Gelli and of the P2 Masonic Lodge, which is believed to have gone after the Pope. Operation Gladio, 1940s to the 1990s. These organizations were known as Stay Behind. They fomented domestic terrorism and soon began terror campaigns on their own, such as bombings, assassinations, and false flag operations under the various covers of Gladio. Set up shop in Italy and helped conduct schools of assassination in Belgium, Denmark, Germany, Greece, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Switzerland, Turkey, Sweden, Austria, France, Finland, and Spain. Operation Gladio is an undisputed historical fact. Gladio was part of the post-World War II program set up by the CIA and NATO, supposedly to thwart future Soviet communist invasions or influence in Italy and Western Europe. Once NATO was established, Gladio became the hidden arm of paramilitary operations. Again, it was funded through the OSS, CIA, and MI6. It included the Galen Org, German Abwehr, and all of the resistance forces in Europe after World War II. The United States, the world's only superpower. For 71 years, the United States convinced much of the world that there was an international conspiracy out there, an international communist conspiracy, seeking no less than control over the entire planet. The purpose of which had no socially redeeming values, and the world was made to believe that it somehow needed the United States to save it from communist darkness. Just buy our weapons, said Washington. Let our military and our corporations roam freely across your land and give us veto power over whom your leaders will be, and we'll protect you. I don't know, guys. Does that sound like a mafia to you guys?
Yep.
Sounds worse than mafia.
Jeez. NATO's School for Assassins, targeted killings, executive action policy, black ops, wet works. Lyman Lemser, Alan Dulles, Reinhard Galen, Guardians of the Republic. Assassination training schools. Here's some of the people, some of the men who ran these schools. This entire school for training assassins and its assassins is covert and clandestine. It doesn't officially exist. Who are some of these clandestine and covert warriors? These directors of assassination schools, the teachers and the students of black operations, who don't officially exist. Lyman Lemnitzer, Alan Dulles, Reinhard Galen, Otto Skorzeny, whom you're going to be hearing a lot more of in April of this year. William Harvey, John J. McCloy, Jean-René Swatter, Edward Lansdale, Lucien Conin, and Richard Helms. You see Lucien Conin right here? Okay? Guess where he went to high school?
I know.
Where?
He went to high school with my dad, Wyandotte High School.
He did. He went to school with my dad, both your dad. And when I heard that, I go, my God, where's the annual? I want to get a picture of it. Went to Wyandotte High School. Okay? He was the right arm man of a guy by the name of Edward Lansdale. And Lansdale's here. Okay? Right arm man. Lansdale put together assassination programs for the United States. And Conin was his right arm man to get covert operatives to go out and kill people. Wyandotte High School. And we just thought it was a basketball program. Good job, Buzz. That's good. I like that. Chapter 12, the Dulles Transaction and the Dulles Transformation. The Dulles Transaction. By 1947, the Dulles Transaction legally combined all of these elements and created a national security state. Pentagon, CIA with the Nazis, NATO, National Security Agency, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. A secret government including a secret history, a warm blanket for cover, the national security, and a hidden agenda. The Dulles Transformation from the OSS to the CIA in the Cold War, all under this umbrella of secrecy, including executive action and plausible deniability, hidden tools of the trade. Executive action. Executive action is a term used by the Central Intelligence Agency in direct support of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In the early 1950s and 60s, this phrase was a reference to their assassination operations and capabilities. These operations were often conducted by the CIA's Division D, a subsection of the agency's Directorate of Operations. Plausible deniability. In our Cold War's history, the unspeakable was the void in our government's covert action doctrine of plausible deniability, sanctioned by the June 18, 1948 National Security Council Directive NSC 10/2. Under the direction of Alan Dulles and General Lyman Lemnitzer, the CIA and the military interpreted plausible deniability as a green light to assassinate national leaders, overthrow governments, and lie to cover up any trace of accountability. Pentagon leadership. Tone deaf to the Constitution. Historian John Newman in JFK and Vietnam wrote that when Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Lyman Lemnitzer similarly deplored the tendency of the United States government to waste time in quibbling over policy. Lemnitzer's continuing complaints that Kennedy would not take military advice indicates how tone deaf the Pentagon's leadership was to the Constitution and to the realities of the Cold War in the nuclear age. Complex geopolitical problems were usually not amenable and simplistic military solutions. JFK appreciated this, but the Joint Chiefs didn't get it. Guardians of the Republic. These are the Cold Warriors who wanted JFK removed. Alan Dulles, Director of CIA, fired by JFK after the Bay of Pigs. William Harvey, fired by JFK, sent back to the CIA in 1963. Station chief in Rome, Italy, under NATO. Lyman Lemnitzer, 1963, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, relieved of command, sent to NATO, which he started, Brussels, Belgium. Dulles trusts the Bank of Secrets of the national security state. When President Truman signed into law the National Security Act, it gave Allen Dulles carte blanche, complete freedom and full authority to the CIA and his entire Bank of Secrets. Dulles transported these secrets from Europe and Asia at the end of World War II and legally instituted targeted killings, executive action, implausible deniability, a green light to assassinate national leaders, overthrow governments, and lie to cover up any trace of accountability. He now possessed the money, the Nazi gold, the power, the Pentagon, and the legal authority Congress to control the United States and the world. Dealey Plaza, the altar of national security. So in answer to this question, did we sacrifice our freedom, our security, our values, our conscience on this altar of national security on November 22nd, 1963? Yes, we did. Thank you. Lights. All right, guys. Timing is everything. I'll tell you what, I did that pretty good time, but I didn't leave too much time for questions. If we don't finish questions, we're going to go over to Johnny's and pick it up from there and have a few tips of Coke and Kool-Aid, yes. Any questions? I know we have some questions. People have some, so I can at least throw some of them out. Anybody? Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Is this believable stuff?
Yes.
It really is, but back in 1963, they would call you a kook. You have no idea what you're talking about. And you are condemning the United States of America. It sounds like my dad. But you know what? World War II guys, they fought for what was right. And I am never going to cut that down because those are soldiers. And soldiers just go and they do the job. Yes?
I just have a question. How do you translate that to contemporary stuff? I mean, what's going on today? I mean, you talk to educators who say, this stuff that we talked about here tonight, this stuff never shows up in schools, never shows up in classes. You try to get someone in their 20s and 30s to come to one of your presentations, except for the ones who are your students.
Yeah, and I do have several of
Yeah,
my
I know,
students.
and that's great. But how do you relate it to today? I mean, you know, you look at communism, capitalism, and all these things that were prevalent in the World War II, post-World War II era, how it led up to Kennedy's assassination. But in the 54 years since, and today, with you know, all of this Brexit and all this stuff that's going on in Europe and Asia and the world economy, all this stuff is just overwhelming.
I would say you have to get teachers like myself, like Brian, to get into the classroom and actually teach history and give the kids an opportunity to ask questions. Most of the things that we do in school right now is that we don't allow the kids to ask questions. We just give them a piece of paper to fill out and we'll check it and see if you're past me and go on to the next stage. There is no communication, not like we used to have. And like I said, I really think that you need teachers that know their history and continue to find out history of the future, which is really the history of the past, and bring it into the classroom and discuss it. We don't have that at this time. Everybody refers to the idea that I'm going to go to the internet and the internet will answer it for you. And so at this particular time, God, that's who I'm battling. I mean, I used to battle rock groups and other things, but I used to bring that into my classroom, and my students would listen to that. I said, okay, now let's figure out what this is about. I mean, like a lot of the songs that came out of the 60s, American Woman, anybody know what that's about? American Woman, stay away from me. American Woman, Mama, let me be. Statue of Liberty. Yeah, I don't want no war machines. I don't want your ghetto scenes. God, it's different. How about that? When you hear American Women from here on out, oh my God, that's what they're talking about. It's in the lyrics. And the other thing, if you could ever understand this, God forbid, rap. And I know, sit back and you go, my God, but they're telling you a story too. And that's more modern than anything else, but we don't want to hear it because these rappers, they're gang members. Well, some of those gang members are only for condoms. Okay? So somewhere down the line, we're going to have to break that age barrier, and we're going to have to sit back and say, okay, who are you? And I remember telling the story of a kid that was sent to my class because nobody else could handle him. And basically nobody wanted him. And he was a black kid, a junior, came to my class, and I said, no, I'm the last step here. What can I do to help you get out of this class? And he goes, I don't take notes. Maybe I told this last time. I said, okay, let's figure out what to do. He says, well, I can rap. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I can rap. I said, well, rap me something. So he raps me Leviticus. I said, excuse me? So I get a whole different idea of who this kid is when we start doing biblical quotes and everything. And then I said, I got an idea. Why don't you pay attention to class, and then at the end of the day, you rap back to me what I just told you. And he did. And I just sat back and I was going, my God, did we miss these kids in education? Yes, because nobody wants to try. That's the problem with our teachers. They don't want to try. We're looking for a paycheck, and most of us are. I never got those paychecks, but at the same time, I had a goal in my life. I wanted to be a teacher, and I wanted to be better than Coach Malley and any of those other coaches that we had at our high school. And I wanted to do something and to get people involved. I did. But now I want to get back in, but I'm not sure how to get back in. And they won't let me back in because I'm overeducated.
Well, most of the folks today in schools, I mean, what our lives is basically a 15-minute blurb on television,
Yes.
or what are the Kardashians doing today, or what's, President Trump, what sex scandal is. That's what everybody's interested in. They're not interested in ancient history like this. It's 54 years ago. My God, you think it was a civil war?
Slightly disagree with you, but only slightly. If you look at some of the programs coming out on the History Channel and stuff, it's one of the questions I'm going to have for Casey tonight is like the hunting Hitler, the this, the other ones they got. You're starting to see a minor, but like I said, I only minorly disagree. There's still an interest there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming out of these schools.
Yeah, and there is, but I think for the most part, you really have to have teachers that are willing to go that extra mile.
Put the extra work in to get
Put the extra work in, yeah. And in order for me to bring this, and I brought this into my history class, and a lot of people say, how can you do that? I go, well, it's history. So I had to rewrite my curriculum and make sure that I could put this in. And I kind of a little covertly put it in and say, okay, this is what we're going to study. But at the same time, I taught this from day one. And we're talking 35, 40 years ago, we were talking about the Nazis. I already knew all that stuff. But trying to get that out to make people believe it. I mean, my father didn't believe it. He sat back and he goes, I've never believed you one bit. But what got my father convinced was about a year before he died, he comes up to me, he says, my God, he says, what the hell do you read? And I said, I read everything, Dad. You gave me a library card, and I said, I exhausted that thing, and now I'm reading National Archives documents that have been redacted thousands of times. And I said, the bad part about it is, and he goes, no, he says, I'll tell you the bad part about it is, he says, I never believed you for 25 years. But he says, you told me everything about the Iran-Contra affair before Bill Moyers told me everything about it. And I said, what are you talking about? I hadn't even seen what was out there yet. So I went over to his house and we watched it, and he goes, you are scaring the hell out of me.
We had to disguise the name of the program at Ottawa University. We couldn't say the JFK assassination because that's too controversial, so we called it Assassinations of America. So we did a 40-hour presentation, and 39 and a half of it was on the Kennedy assassination. But we did talk about the other three assassinations. But
We got it. Or somebody got it.
that's the way we had to get it in there. I mean, because if we said we're going to do a controversial topic, oh no, we can't do that.
Well, guys, we've got to get out of here. And the other thing is, I want to thank you guys for coming. I want you to think about this. It really weighs on whether whether or not you want to believe all this stuff, because it's a little easier just to go back and say, nobody's gonna do anything about it. You know what, my wife asked me a long time ago, when is this gonna stop? And I go, it's not. In fact, the archives are just starting to open up, and we're gonna keep going. And there are some young people that are still interested in this. And the bad part about this is that they don't quite understand it all. And not that they do it at being young, our older generation doesn't quite understand. And the bad part about it is, you are pissed off, and you should be. But the bad part about it is, where do you go to tell somebody?
How do you fix it?
Yeah, how do you fix this?